Donald J. Trump, delivering masterfully his first State of the Union, addressing an absolute home run, dead red grand slam. 75% of his speech focused on the tremendous economic and military results that the nation has had in the first year of his presidency that people forget about, and then going forward, outlining his vision, not only for America, but short-term policies in 2018. I thought it was one of the best State of the Union speeches I've ever heard. The Democrats, in the meantime, sitting on their hands, they look like death warmed over, wouldn't even stand up when the president talked about grieving parents who were in the galley upstairs and whose daughter had been brutally raped and murdered by an illegal MS-13 member. The Democrats wouldn't even stand for that while the mother is crying uncontrollably. I mean, the optics for the Democrats last night, just absolutely abhorrent. And talking about snatching perhaps a defeat here from the jaws of victory. But the president hitting, in my judgment, a dead red grand slam, dead center field home run last night in his speech. And perhaps this administration and the Republicans turning the corner now going into the midterms. Joining us now to get her analysis, one of my favorite commentators. You know what? When we first started, we used to fight because she was for Marco Rubio and she was never Trumper. But now she's like come around, which is why I love her to death. And she gives you sober, honest analysis. Liz Peek, you can follow her at Liz Peek. And she writes for my favorite newspaper, The Hill. Even more reason to love her. Liz, good to have you with us.
Good morning. Thank you. I'm delighted to join you. And yes, I like the speech very, very much. I think going into it, we'd heard a lot about how Trump was going to be reaching across the aisle, trying to woo Democrats. And, I think a lot of his supporters were like, well, wait a minute, we're already reaching across the aisle. The immigration proposal, for example, that he has out there is full of things that Democrats presumably like expanding the number of dreamers who are going to be allowed to stay in the country. So let's be a little careful here. And in fact, I thought, to echo your words, he really did a good job of staying true to his campaign promises, and yes, invoking the need to work with Democrats, which of course he does because you can't get too much done without 60 votes in the Senate. But you know what? They're not going to play ball. So I think they look, honestly, pretty darn stupid.
Think, Liz Peek, of Nancy Pelosi, the optics there, chewing on her lip, black dress. I mean, she looked like death warmed over. I mean, I know she's a little bit long in the tooth, and, I'm getting there too, so I don't want to talk about her age. But if you're in middle America right now, Liz, and you've got a better job, and your income is going up, and you're getting a tax cut, and your paycheck just went up by $60, $70, $80, $90, $100 this week on your 2-week pay scale, February 1st, and your kids are moving out of the basement, and jobs are coming back, would you really look at Nancy Pelosi last night and say, yeah, I want to put her in charge of my economy?
I think you really make a good point. And it wasn't just Nancy Pelosi, who, by the way, would occasionally turn around to scan the room to make sure her left flank was, staying seated and not misbehaving by applauding. But did you see Cory Booker during the conversation about, as you point out, the families that were grieving? I mean, he looked like he was sucking on a lemon. He was so sour. I mean, it is the traditional role of the minority party to not evince a great deal of enthusiasm. But when you talk about the lowest ever unemployment amongst black Americans and the Congressional Black Caucus stays seated, that just looks absurd. And, here, I wrote a piece for The Hill a couple of days ago just talking about this, how Debbie Wasserman Schultz talking about how the tax cuts and the bonuses and so forth were insignificant, and Nancy Pelosi's comments about crumbs, they really do look out of touch. And I don't know if last night will turn out to be a turning point. I hope so, because the president really does deserve better approval ratings than he now has. And I think as we go into the midterm election season, Democrats are getting a little overconfident about how their message is going to trump the economy. And what is their message? That they hate Donald Trump. That is so far really all they've got. And, I just don't think that is a big winning message.
Look, Liz, I mean, that speech last night I thought was a home run. I mean, I don't know how he could have done any better. The substance of results, I mean, results matter, right? So you have these great results that he's basically outlining, and you can't even spin this, right? I mean, you can't spin it. Either the companies are investing or they're not. They're opening up plants or they're not. Jobs are up or they're not. Your 401k is up or it's not. You check your statement, it's up or it isn't. You get a pay raise or you don't. I mean, you can't make this stuff up. I mean, either ISIS has territory or they don't. So he outlines all these results and then his plan for going forward. And yet you look at the Democrats there and it's like, geez, I can't wait till we go back to 1% growth, high unemployment, and we can all get back to the pit of misery so we can win. I mean, it's sick.
Chuck Schumer was in the Senate yesterday talking about the two words that Trump would never say last night were thanks, Obama, because we all know it's Obama's recovery. As we all know, it is not Obama's recovery. It is on steroids now because of the tax cuts. And, by the way, just about as important is the cutting of regulations and red tape. And you can document the surge in business optimism and so forth. By the way, 2 data points today in the paper. One, home ownership has surged in 2017 for the first time in 15 years, led by millennials. So to your point, young people are finally getting a break. And young people, millennials who have been taught and educated in the wonders of socialism, hopefully they're beginning to get a little bit of a different education here. Secondly, consumer optimism jumped in January, and I attribute that totally to these tax cut fueled bonuses and pay hikes. So, again, I think that's just extremely difficult to combat with a lot of negative chatter about how really Obama did this all for us, because again, you can document month by month the changes in mood and optimism that Trump's policies have brought. So, I think the Republicans do have a lot to crow about, and I hope I think they're doing a better job of messaging. Obviously, one of the things in the last several years has been very disappointing is Republicans are so inept at telling their own story. It seems to me they're getting better.
Well, the president's getting better, right?
Yeah, he's getting better, and they're mimicking him, which is good.
Yeah, I mean, that's what it is. The president getting better. I really had a good feeling about last night's speech because the president and the vice president hosted on, I guess it was Monday, right, before the speech. Monday night, they hosted a private reception for their top TV surrogates to thank them. Like, there was 20 of us. I think I was one of the 20, so it was a very small group. And, he made remarks, but he was in a great mood on Monday night, just great mood. I mean, there was a bounce in his step, and he was really excited. And, I've been around the president enough to know when, he's in a good mood and when he's not in a good mood. I mean, he's just a human being. He was really pumped on Monday, so I had a good feeling about this speech, and I thought it was fantastic. But I really, I've got CNN on now. And, oh, by the way, sidebar, like all the CNN Trump surrogates, none of them got to go on last night, by the way, after the speech. Not one of them, including me. So they cut everybody out, and they just had their left-wing anchors on to blast it. So you know what they're blasting now is he didn't bring up Russia collusion. I mean, you have got to be kidding me. That's their criticism. You've got to be kidding me.
Yeah, I agree. Look, they can't let go of that because they can't let go of the Russiagate story because the second story that was supposed to take its place about how he's mentally incompetent, I think he kind of blew that out of the water last night. So really that's all they've got. And by the way, there's a poll out from YouGov saying that 75% of people watching the speech last night approved of it, 25% disapproved. So what the left is now very eager to do is obviously undermine that. They're going to tell people who watched that speech, which, by the way, I suspect was a very big crowd. Remember, the first year of Obama's presidency, I think 44 million people watched the State of the Union speech from Obama. My guess is we're going to see pretty big numbers on this speech as well. Now they're telling all those 50 million or 40 million who watched, no, you didn't see it the way it wasn't like you saw it. Let us explain to you why it's different from what you thought it was. And that's a pretty uphill road, I think. I think it made a big impression, and frankly, he needed that. I think this is a very good time for this to happen.
Liz, okay, so if you're the Democrats right now, because you're doing the spin thing today, but I'm not sure they can spin or squeal their way out of this. But if you watched the speech last night and you're one of those people that maybe you voted for Trump, maybe you didn't, maybe you stayed home, and, you know, he's got all this negativity around him. I mean, and you looked at the Democrats last night. You just looked at them. I mean, my question to you is, what do they have to offer after last night? I mean, this is why I think with the 50 million watching it, it is a turning point, because you have to say to yourself, is that the party that, what do they offer me? I don't have any idea after last night.
Well, I think what they're going to go back to their identity politics. They're going to go to the various voting sectors that they've been successful with during the Obama years, the Hispanics, African Americans, transgenders, you know, all these different groups that they have sort of chiseled out of the populace. And they're going to talk about how they've been abused by the present government, and that they're going to make their lives better. But I have to say, I do think an awful lot of those people are going to look at the record, as you point out, and look at their paycheck come February when they have more take-home pay because of the tax cuts, better job opportunities, et cetera. And they're also going to sort of, if they listened to Trump's speech last night, they're going to wonder, what's wrong with that? What's wrong with putting America first? What's wrong with making our foreign aid dependent on reciprocal fairness and alignment with the interests of the United States? What's wrong with saying that trade deals that benefit other countries more than us are inadequate? I mean, it's a lot of common sense stuff, John, and you don't have to be an ideologue. And in fact, as we all know, Trump isn't an ideologue. He really isn't a bona fide conservative on many fronts, but he is a pragmatist, and he wants to get the job done. Here's an interesting thought to leave your audience with. When Obama gave his first State of the Union address, his polls had narrowed. Remember, he came in with great enthusiasm. People loved him. By the time of his first State of the Union address, he was basically even in the polls. Number approval, disapproval, about the same. And it kind of got rockier from there. In Trump's case, of course, he came in a little bit higher than he is now, but expectations have been so low, the Democrats have been so negative on this guy, it wouldn't surprise me that he ends up basically looking better over time than he started out. And last night could have been sort of the first building block of that. If we have another year, the Democrats, to your point, are all about resisting Donald Trump. But right now, that puts them in an incredible box because they have promised the Dreamers relief, and Trump has made a proposal which a lot of people, including polling shows most Americans, think is a reasonable one. If they just defy that and refuse to even work with him on it, and the Dreamers never get any kind of resolution, I think the Democrats are just incredibly in bad shape.
Pit of misery, it's going to blow up in their face. I know you got to go. What you think last night of Chapstick Joe?
I didn't watch. I had to write about this. I hear that it was sort of a strange presentation, but I also, in reading about it this morning, it sounded to me like Kennedy just sort of, didn't really have any policy prescriptions, talked about sort of the same stuff Democrats always talked about, but I haven't really spent a lot of time on it.
It was a rant, and in the middle of it, I actually felt sorry for him. Almost like I did, you know what it reminded me of? Remember the first response to President Obama, Bobby Jindal, remember that?
Yeah.
Right?
It's not a happy, it's a trail of tears, right? Bobby Jindal and then Marco Rubio, both of them kind of blew themselves up on the response. It's a tough gig.
You can really hurt yourself. And I remember, I've never been a Rubio fan, so I was like, whatever, water. But I like Jindal, and I like when he came in. I like what he stood for, and I thought, here's a guy, maybe he can do something. And I remember right in the middle of that speech, I felt sorry for him, like I felt pain for him. I had the same feeling last night for this young fella that they put out there that really was ill-equipped, unprepared, had too much chapstick on, got very nervous right in the middle of it, started sweating, and really didn't say anything. And I thought it was a rambling, kind of stupid response.
Yeah.
So yeah,
well,
you're right.
I mean, I think it's sort of stupid to go to a sort of young celebrity hopeful as opposed to a real seasoned vet because, again, it's really tough. You're just talking into a camera typically, and trying to refute a big pageant that just went before. It's pretty difficult.
It is a difficult thing to do, but he didn't do himself any favors or the Democrats last night. Again, Liz, I really don't know where the Democrats go with this. And you're right. They're pinned themselves in a box with this economy and with the Dreamers. I mean, they're just boxed in. And in order for them to succeed, America has to fail. That's sick. It really is sick.
That's really the best line you've got. I think that's exactly right. Do they really want America to fail? That's the way they look.
Power. It's all about power. The only, and I know you got to go, final thing is the only sickest thing like that is the fact that we have private prisons on the stock exchange, and the more people the DAs put in them, the more money they make. I mean, that is equally as sick. We got to fix that, Liz. We got to fix it. John Fredericks Radio Network. Liz Peek, thanks for being with us. Hey, follow her at Liz Peek. Go to The Hill. You can read her column right there about this big speech. Liz, always good to have you.
Thank you so much. Have a great day.